Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Emilia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
All right, let's talk Kamala Khan. Woo-hoo!
Yes, Miss Marvel. So we're definitely going to be focusing on the miniseries on Disney Plus.
Because one of us hasn't read the comic, and that one of us is not me.
Yes, I am a host of a Batman-themed podcast. How dare I not read Marvel comics?
Whatever.
I'm just saying, you threw that shade first. You threw that shade.
It's really good, though.
I'm going to read it. I will.
Read it. All right, sure you will. Mm-hmm.
I will.
So it's one of the 8 Marvel comics that I own. Well, actually, I meant to get the originals, but I think I don't know. There's, you know how they do it. It's like her origin story, and then there's her initial comics. I don't know how these things work, but my friend had a bunch of them, and I really enjoyed it. Although I have to admit, I kind of liked that they changed her origin story because it was a little muddled in the comics. And really the part that you love is her and her family and maneuvering, becoming a superhero, and just her personality. So yeah, all the important stuff, in my opinion, they kept in the show.
Good. I loved this show. I feel like it had so much heart. And it was one of those where, even though it was still that standard, the whole world is at stake, it still just felt down to earth. It kind of reminded me of like Spider-Man, right? Like with Spider-Man, it's like one of those things like, yeah, the villain is maniacal and there's some wild stuff going on, but at the end, it still feels like a movie or a show about a neighborhood. Like, it's not global.
I would totally agree with that. In fact, I really enjoy the show. My negative commentary is actually the plot around the villain and, you know, the kind of conflicts that she deals with as a superhero, because to be honest, they felt a little rushed and a little kind of haphazard, but I don't think they were meant to be the main theme of the show. And so it kind of makes sense to me that they seemed a little bit kind of second glance. Because I agree with you. I definitely think it's about the community. It's about family. It's about, kind of that Spider-Man vibe. So I think when this came out is when people were really starting to grow tired of the MCU.
Yes, it was definitely, it came out at bad timing, but at the same time, that being said, there is an issue, I feel like, with nerddom where they don't give certain things a chance because of how it looks at first glance. There is some, I'll say it, toxicity there. And so a lot of people did not watch it just because it didn't fit what they thought.
And it wasn't for them.
Yeah.
I think that was part of it too, is I think it was also something that was most specifically targeting Kamala Khan's generation.
Yeah.
You know, trying to hit younger folks. And so I mean, she's a Muslim. She's a female character. She has the Pakistani background. There are all these things that personally I found super wonderful and intriguing, and I want my entertainment to inform me and help me connect with and understand better people that are different than me. But I agree with you
Yes.
that, well, one, you've got the nerdum that says, "Why isn't it exactly like the comics?"
Right.
So there's the those people, but I think there's also people who struggle with the fact that honestly a lot of this stuff is meant to represent and show people who have dealt with adversity. I mean, people in Star Trek, for example. I know you don't know Star Trek, but I have a coffee mug that when I work, I turn the other direction so people can't read it. But it's another example of some of this toxicity that can come out. And so it's essentially the uniform for Captain Janeway and it says male tears on it.
I love it.
And it's because here you are, you're in Star Trek. The first interracial kiss on TV and all these other things that really push people forward, and people complained about female captains.
Yes.
So yeah, we nerds, sometimes yeah, we're a group that can struggle with letting in new people.
Which is so strange to me because that's our humble beginnings,
I
right?
know. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we were like it's being a nerd used to be kind of being an outcast, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, that's weird or that's bizarre. Like it's just like Juan said in one of our episodes, like it was something where like you used to almost keep it like a secret,
Oh, right.
right?
Yeah.
You used to
Yeah.
almost keep it like a secret, like, oh, I'm not gonna do this. But now it's what's so strange about it is nerddom has become pop culture, but when it becomes so mainstream, unfortunately, you get everything with that, right? You get
Mm,
the racism, you get the sexism, you get the Islamophobia, you get the
mhm.
toxic masculine, you get all of those things suddenly when it becomes more than people in a comic book store talking when it become like and
I'm gonna argue all that stuff was there. It
yeah.
was already there.
Well, no, I
Yeah.
guess what I mean is I guess all right, so I do believe you. It was already there, but I think that once there was a soapbox to stand
I
on,
see. I hear what you're
once
saying.
the movies started coming on TNT, right? Like Spider-Man comes on TNT now. Like what? Like that's crazy, right? But yeah, once it was at that level, there was a like I said, you kind of got like those nerds that had a soapbox and they're like, well, this is how things should be. And it's like,
Mhm.
no.
Well, some of the interesting kind of oddities, and I don't fully totally understand it, but like in science fiction and fantasy writing, for example, you actually often have these extreme camps. You have the super diverse, never fit inside of a box. Understandably, they have this like intricate, creative kind of outlook. And then you have some actually very conservative minded folks as well within this encampment. And I think sometimes we think of all of the stretching and encouraging the world to embrace the people on the outskirts as everyone within science fiction fantasy. But um, yeah, there's just a whole span of all of us, and I see what you're saying though, where now that it's mainstream, you hear some of this stuff a little bit more. But I mean, I've told you before, like like being a woman in a comic book store, it still is something that we, if you think of someone into comics, you picture a girl or a boy. I mean, you picture a certain gender, you really do.
Yeah,
So, I think there's always those nuances, but I love her character.
I do too.
Um, I
And
love
yeah,
how it really gives you this look at this just really wonderful human being, and you can either really connect to her and finally say, "Look, here I am on the page," or you can say, "Wow," and really embrace the learning experience and connecting with a character who can help you see a more expanded world.
and to touch on that expanded world, I have to say, like, as far as the MCU goes, I don't think I've walked away feeling educated about something the way that I
Mm,
did with this show, because I'm not gonna
yeah.
lie, there was so much I didn't know about Islam. There was so much I
Mm,
didn't know about the history of Pakistan, and like I had honestly, and I felt so ignorant while I was watching it that I went on like a deep dive
nice.
after finding out about the partition of India.
Yep.
Um that her family's like ancestors were involved in, like her great grandparents were involved in, and everything. And I had never heard of that. And I
Mm,
was just, my jaw was on the floor. And I mentioned it to some friends of mine that have a similar background with Kamala. And they told me all of these they told me so many stories about what their grandparents, great grandparents went through with the partition of India and
mm,
how nightmarish it was. And I felt really bad because I'm like, how did that never get talked about? Like, I'd never heard of
mm.
that. I don't remember hearing about it in high school. What's bad about that is I didn't remember hearing about it in high school, but I also took AP classes and placed out. So I didn't have to take
Yeah,
history classes in college. And I'm like, I
yeah.
wonder if I would have heard about it in college.
Possible. And also, actually, when we were in high school, so I think we were both nerdy and, like you said, took AP history classes. Um, so I remember AP US history.
Hmm.
I think there was a European history,
Yes.
but that was the only.
Yeah.
What other ones were there?
Yeah. Those were the two. Those were the
So
AP ones.
no wonder.
However, no, this is why I don't give it a pass.
Oh,
Because
I'm not giving it a pass.
the whole partitioning thing, yeah, that was all
Yeah.
Britain had a hand in it.
Oh,
So
European countries had a hand in a lot of stuff.
yes. So I'm like, no, we should have
And I want to
heard
be clear.
about this.
That's not me giving it a pass. That's me
Right.
saying, "Wow, we weren't even trying to make it seem like we were looking from more perspectives.
But
Like, let's keep this Western."
it's so interesting because I remember, like, as when 9/11 happened,
Mm,
I was a freshman in high school.
mm,
And so I remember all of the Islamophobia that came after
yeah.
September 11th. It was so horrible, even though, and honestly, and even then, I was like, this is really horrible. And it was just, it dominated culture,
Mm,
and it was just widely accepted, and it was so horrible. And the thing is, a lot of those attitudes that were around back then that we cringed at, they're still around now.
yeah.
They're still around now. And so there were quite a few people. There was some very nasty things on the internet when this show was even
Yeah.
released.
This
Just
is this is one of those
yeah.
times where I'm kind of grateful that I don't like to live in the comments sections of anything.
Yes, and I shouldn't. I shouldn't.
You've gotta create a protective. But so
I did.
here's the irony I find in attacking these stories and these characters. My theory, because we say that, superheroes don't exist. But my theory is that if we think about the context of superheroes, actually having adversity, so being from a marginalized group of some sort, for example, or having a disability, or any of these things that create adversity, especially in these kind of larger threads that they kind of hint at in this storyline, I actually think that that makes you better at adapting to getting superpowers and being able to maneuver that situation better. I mean, she even there were like a few quotes from her that I think really hit on this really well. She was like, when she was told she had a mutation, she said, whatever it is, it'll just be another label. right? So she has this kind of sense of the different labels that people try and put on you and how to maneuver those really difficult situations.
Yeah.
And she also says to Kamran when he's kind of struggling with his kind of new power set, and she's like, there is no normal, not for us. We just do the best with what we've been given.
Yeah.
I really do think that they show, first off, why family and community is so important when you deal with a world that automatically looks at you as suspect or stereotypes you or puts you in these cruel boxes. But then also just shows, I don't know, a wonderful embracing and growth of a superpower that really and truly, I think that it's just so ironic to beat down a character like this when this is the quintessential just this is where a true superhero, one of the best, is going to grow out of.
Yes, because, she has such a phenomenal support system with her family. And what's
Mm,
so interesting is you see both sides of it. You're like, okay, her family needs to trust her,
yeah.
but she also needs to trust her family, right?
Mhm.
And it was one of those things where kind of learning about it, like especially it's particularly her relationship with her mom,
Oh yeah.
right? Because the mom was just all about like, you're not wearing this out. This is what you should be
Mhm.
doing, and just thumb on her. And it was all about protection.
Yep.
But there's so many times that protection can get it goes too far to the point where like, okay, the person you're trying to protect, you're keeping them from living, right? You're keeping
Or
them,
you're
yeah.
pushing them toward rebelling.
Yes.
And both kind of happened in this
Yes.
scenario. And there these things can go to an extreme where it's bad. And that wasn't, I mean, clearly her mom was loving. This was more kind of a culture clash and teenage daughter versus mother kind of friction.
Boomers and
Um
Gen Z going at it.
yeah. Would her mom be boomer
I I
or is
feel
she
like
Gen
it's
X? I don't know how old she is.
I feel like it's the cusp.
Yeah, I don't know where that yeah, I don't know where that line is. But yeah, those dang Gen and she's definitely Gen Z, right? She's not
Yeah.
Gen what's the next one? Alpha?
Yeah. No, I think she's Gen Z.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I
think
don't know
so. I don't
those
know for sure. I
cutoffs.
don't know the cutoffs, but I mean, yeah.
All
We
I know is we're millennials, so we're old now.
I was about to say we all get lumped in together by anyone in their like 50s
That's true.
anyway. So like they just mix us all in. We're millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, like yeah, we're just
All the
bad.
same.
Yeah. We're just bad and ruining the economy that they made, it's all our fault, but yeah, now we can't get houses. But that's a different story for a different day, right? This is a
Yeah,
comic book podcast.
there you go.
Nothing that should be focused in reality, nothing that should be blatantly a representation of society, right? Like comic books are just supposed to be completely made up with no basis for anything at all. And that's why so many people were so angry about Miss Marvel because
Well,
how dare them?
and so the interesting thing is though, so okay, and we've talked about this before, um, but representation can happen in a few different veins. And yeah, so there are times when a story is about the culture or about certain things within the culture. And then there are times where it's about the character. But because it's about the character, there are these things about culture that are woven in.
Yeah,
And I truly believe Miss Marvel was that latter one, the one that is about the character and the culture woven in. However, because we aren't used to our mainstream entertainment weaving in that culture,
right.
I think for some people they feel like they were getting beaten over the head with an education or that it was that first one I described, the one where it's all about the culture or um something about that group. And really don't think that's what this is. I really saw it as this is about a character. It's just her cultural background and the things that were woven in. It didn't seem so subtle because it's not what we're used to seeing on TV in this country.
Well, and what's so frustrating about that is because the reason we don't get we're not used to it is because it doesn't get shown, you know?
Right.
Because I mean, you look at her culture, right? And you show them going to the mosque, you show them celebrating Eid the same way they show Daredevil walking through a Catholic church, the same
Yeah.
way that they show us celebrating the 4th of July. They're the
Mm-hmm.
same things, but
Yeah.
because you've only seen one thing, you're not open to
Right.
another side of it. And that's what is so unfortunate, because now you see a show like this and you're getting all this education about a culture that you didn't know, and there's several ways to react to it. Either you can say, ugh, this is being shoved down my throat, even though you bought the Disney Plus subscription and you pressed play. Or you get the reaction, which was closer to mine, where, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know that. And I go down the deep end of
Yeah.
Wikipedia and stay up
Which is so
way too
cool.
late, which is because I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to hear about it, and I'm going to probably
Yes.
message my friends way too late at night, but they'll see it in the morning and tell me about it more. And but yeah, and so it's really really upsetting that so many people don't know about this show, don't know about how good it is, simply because they got turned off of it and use the word woke in the wrong way, like
Yeah.
most people do.
Now, to be fair to some people out there, I know plenty of people who that's not the reason they didn't see it. So I know for some people they grew tired of
Right.
MCU and
I
they
don't want to
added all the
stereotype. You're
shows,
right.
and there are some people are just getting burned out on MCU in general.
Yes.
So that we're not saying that if you didn't see it, you're there's an
No.
issue with you, but there is.
No.
But no, I totally, understand where you're coming from. And I know you and I see it in the same vein. And, I think part of it too is there's a discomfort and almost a confusion. It can actually feel wrong in some ways, I think. T- you can be used to all the stories being about you or being more relatable to you. Um, So I can understand in some veins. So as a person who is white, like I can understand like sometimes I see things and it's uncomfortable. And it's not because it's wrong, but it's because I don't know about this and this is foreign to me and it's not done for me. And that's not a bad thing, but it's uncomfortable. And I think honestly part of that is it's not my fault. It's not the people who made its fault. It's just the reality that there has been the majority voice, the majority representation. Kind of like how, if it's a female character, then I'm like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes I connect with that and I realize it's been missing, right? So
Yeah.
I do think part of it too is I mean, in some ways there is kind of a loss that comes with like, hey, this it's not no longer my story most of the time, or this isn't made for me, and you're not used to that.
Yeah.
But I think an important piece is finding a way to sit with that and be uncomfortable and try and find a way where it's like, okay, this isn't meant for me, and let me not get in the way of the people it's meant for. And like you said, also, hey, time for a wiki deep dive, time for me to kind of understand someone else's voice. I think it's also a super cool opportunity.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, and I'm definitely have a lot to say about this show, because I know we have kind of gotten on a
Mm,
big overarching thing, which is very important. But I do think it is also one of those things where, like you said, representation is so important,
Oh yeah.
but people still, even with representation, they'll do the wrong thing with it. It's like you
Oh yeah.
almost had it. You almost had it. Like I remember, and they did it in there was a season of Stranger Things where they do it when all the kids dress up as the Ghostbusters. But the
Mm.
exact same thing happened to me as a kid. We were all playing Ghostbusters on the playground, and I always had to be
Uh,
Winston Zeddemore. They're like, "Oh yeah, well you're Winston, right?" Because
yeah,
ellipsis
cause
because dot dot dot. Or if we're playing Power Rangers, oh yeah, you're Zach, the Black Ranger. Because
mm. It's
dot
kind of
dot
like
dot.
when you're trying to describe someone so people know who it is, and you're like, "Mm, do I just say it's the person who's a different race than everybody else in
Right.
the group?"
Yeah. Right. And so, but it's one of those things. It's like, I mean, I was happy for the representation I got
Oh,
in the
sure, yeah.
show, but it is weird how after
Mm.
that, oh yeah, well you're clearly that guy because, well,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Well, and then there was the piece of representation at first a lot of times was you were in the background. You were there. You were always universal you, not Keaton you, but
Yeah.
you were the sidekick. You were and oftentimes it was kind of the most familiar stereotype, like the nerdy Asian kind of
Hmm.
thing is one common one. Um and so it's been nice to put some of these characters that were often, once they were included, tended to be on the sidelines, still in the background to a certain degree, put them in the forefront, and also just make them like everybody else, right? Because
Right.
I think that's the key too, right? Representation, it takes time and it takes a variety of characters. It's not just a black guy here and then wait a little while. Okay, there's a black guy over here too. Because, yeah, then this situation you're talking about happens. There really needs to be just much more opportunities for
Yeah.
just the interweaving of a lot of different stories and
Hmm.
characters. And I mean, this is all the stuff that all the actors were complaining about at what was it, the Oscars?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I mean, we're not bringing up anything new here.
Yeah. But this character, she's so interesting because it and I as a teacher, I do love like whenever they show the stress
Yep.
that middle schoolers, high schoolers that they actually go through because it is
I feel like
such
they
a
nailed it with her too.
they nailed it. That just so uncomfortable and you have a crush and you're not
Oh
even
my
seeing
god.
that someone has a crush on you and you're just
Yes.
hanging out with your best friend and just geeking out together. Like they just do such a good job of showing this is a regular person. And
Yes. And she kind of like has this sporadic jumping around kind of energy to her
yes,
that's just you can so relate to from, being younger and yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
she's
They
yeah,
nailed that.
they did such a good job with that and they did such a good job of showing like how she interacts with all of these different people. But I
Mm.
also love how open her best friend is. Like
Yes.
everything that all the different festivals they go to and everything, he is completely supportive and sure, I'm gonna wear this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna go to this. And I know that like he does have a crush on her and he does like her, but it does seem like they're good enough friends that he would still be doing that even if it
Oh,
weren't the
yeah.
case. And I really, really liked that about his character, the way he just kind of
Yeah.
rolls with everything. He really is just
Absolutely.
he's the best. He really is a great
He's
guy.
fantastic. What is his name? Bruno? Is that his name?
I think so. I
Yeah.
don't know. I just
He
remember Kamran kept getting his name wrong.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I kept calling him Brian. Yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure it's
but yeah,
Bruno.
it's Bruno. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I did love his character and how he just like you were saying, I mean, just like we're talking about, it's not, oh, look at my Muslim friends or look at my Pakistani friends. It's like, hey, here's a family that actually embraced a kid who didn't really have a family that he could connect to on his own. same on their side too, right? They didn't
Yeah.
see him as someone separate. Um, yeah, it was, and I wonder if it was meant to be kind of a representation in a way of trying to welcome in, like I was saying before, some of these folks that maybe are used to the stories being about themselves and being like, hey, you're still welcome.
Hmm.
Join us. I'm realizing this that's pretty genius kind of what they did there. I like the yeah, it's almost symbolic of probably what they hope to do with a lot of the people who are probably used to being the ones in the center of the comic book story.
Yeah.
Like, come along for the ride. We're happy to have you.
Yeah. And there was such, but there still is just such a good balance of, yes, this is a superhero show, but also, yes, this is the reality. Like when Kamala first gets her powers and the government agency recognizes it. And I think one of the government agents is talking about how their mosque, because of who they are, is
Mm,
already under surveillance
yeah.
by the FBI and the CIA and all these other three-letter
Yeah.
organizations just because they're Muslim. And so I really like the way that they did a good job of just showing like what life is
Mhm.
like
Dude,
being different in this country.
yes, like when they come in and they ask for their IDs and before they can finish, every single person in the room has their ID up because they were ready for it.
Yeah.
I would never that wouldn't have occurred to me.
Yeah.
Right? It's a whole yeah, there was a really good, I think, representation, and once again, I didn't feel like it was beating me over the head by any means, it's just like, these are very real things
No, this
coming
is
up for
real.
these people. Just like, her other best friend who has her head wrap, and, she talked about, being too white for some people, being too brown for other people, and just trying to
Mhm.
kind of find her way in who she was just very God, yeah, it's just such a good they do such a good job of hitting on so many of those things that happen when you're around that age that's
Yeah.
going on. And then you throw in the superpowers just to complicate life.
Yeah. That's what's it's just like we were talking about when we were chatting about Gen V. Like, wow, being a
Oh,
freshman in college is already
ooh,
hard as
buddy.
is, but then yeah, just throw some superpowers in there and mix it up, make it a little bit better. And
Mhm.
that's what happens with her, but I also love with this that like something that is a bit different is not only is she gaining her superpowers and learning to use her powers, but she's also, in order to do that, she's learning so much about her past and
Yeah.
her history, right? And I
Yes.
did really love that because it was just one of those things where y- who you are is so heavily based off of the past, and it might not
Yep.
even be something that you are aware of, but
Mhm.
it did make you who you are
Absolutely.
today, right?
There's
And
so
so
much, intergenerational things that happen. I mean, they found that think about I think the most obvious is your life is impacted by how you're raised, which is impacted by how they were raised and impacted by how the generation before and before and before.
mhm,
But even genetically, biologically,
yeah,
I'm telling the science guy over here, but they've seen that um these major events, things like starvation or trauma or other things that are they've somewhat been easily been able to pinpoint. It actually you see it down the line, and it can change things genetically for people. Yeah, it's so powerful what can happen across generations even. And like you said, things that you're not aware of,
mhm,
and it's so cool how, like you said, they wove it was woven in for her being able to understand her powers. She had to better understand herself, and
right,
that meant she had to better understand her family.
right,
And yeah, that is just so cool and interesting. In the comics, they also kind of have some stuff that's really cool. I mean, she's got these like they're weirder and funkier powers. Like
Yeah.
she she can get all stretchy and she can like change to look like different things. So she actually looked like Captain Marvel at one point, and that's where the Miss Marvel came from in there. And they also did some really cool things about connecting how she looked at herself and dealt with things and how it related to her powers. I think that's one of the really compelling things about her character is the time frame. They hit her at just one of those really poignant developmental moments that we
Yeah.
all I think strongly connect to, and they just yeah, the interweaving of her family and her identity and her powers is just so interesting.
Yeah. But she handles it all extremely well.
Mhm.
Like, given
Agreed.
everything going on, she handles it all like way better than we've seen other heroes handle it, I'll say. Like,
I'm
it's
telling you, adversity
yeah.
sets you up well to adapt.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man. Um, because it's not her first it's not her first time around the block being different, you know, standing out, having to figure out how do you blend in or how do I maneuver this situation. Um, and she's kind of been a misfit.
Mhm.
When she goes to Pakistan, what do her cousins call her? An ABCD? An American born confused Desi, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
And so it's this
Yeah.
and they hit on her, like, not being able to handle the spice over there and some other things, like, she there are these things she was already a misfit. She
Mhm.
already struggled to figure out her place in the world. She had her few people she could, like, rely on, her friends and whatnot. But yeah, the powers she was already trying to figure out all that stuff, and so
Yeah.
I think I truly believe that's part of how she was able to kick butt so quickly.
Yeah, and, and it's one of those things too where the same way that you might feel betrayed by someone in high school, like something that's
Mm.
s as an adult, you feel like it's much smaller
Ah, sure,
in
yeah.
hindsight.
Mhm.
In hindsight, it feels much smaller. When it happens to you then, it's the worst day of your life, right?
Oh, yeah.
But the same way that that could happen to you in high school, it happens to her when she meets the clandestines
Yeah.
the head she betrays her and tries to kill her, but it's
Yeah, that woman didn't give her much of a chance.
yeah,
That was not the smartest villain.
not the smartest, I'll say not the smartest villain, but at the same time, I think she's one of those that showed that like tunnel vision is not always a good thing.
That's fair. That's a nicer way of that's probably a actually a better way of putting it because she wasn't she was actually she seemed like a smart person. I mean,
Yeah.
she was figuring out a lot of things. But yes, she was not patient or maybe her patience had run out cuz who knows how long. I mean, they've been around for a long time.
Right.
Um and also strikes me as the kind of person who um she felt kind of like a general in wartime or something, right? So there's probably a lot going on underneath the surface, but a very stern exterior.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah.
And
That's fair.
and she was also someone that dealt in absolutes. Like until
Mm,
Kamala spoke to her, she just
yeah.
disavowed her son. She's like, all right, either you're completely with me or you're completely against me. And like a lot of villains, only seeing in black or white and not
Yep.
seeing that shade of gray
Oh
that's
yeah.
in the middle that really is what it is. Because it's not like Kamran didn't love his mom. He
Yeah.
just, this was his life and he didn't want to destroy the planet, right? But she's only focused on we need to go home. We need to go home, and that's the only thing that matters. The end. it still breaks right back down to, on the other side of that, Kamala's mom and how she's talking to her and what she's telling her what matters. And it's like, okay, you're not leaving me any room for negotiation
Mm.
here. Like, you're like, oh, it's a cosplay contest, but I don't care. Here's what you're gonna wear. And and like, oh, this fantasy, all these fantasy and stories that you're thinking of. And it's like, but that's so important. And you're telling her not to do that. And
However,
yeah,
I do also think the storyline shows that Kamala could have found a way to show her mom why these things were important, right? So her mom says, "You can
communication.
go. Your dad's going to go with you. Look, I created this costume for you."
Yeah.
There was no, actually, there's actually a costume I already have, and da da da. And I mean, like, look, girls working with some hormones, I'm sure. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is not me saying like, oh my god, Kamala, what's wrong with you? It's more, these things happen all the time, and like you were saying before, things run hot, and it feels like the biggest thing in the world. And I think it really showed as things progressed through the show how everybody was actually on the same side,
Right.
but they didn't realize they were on the same side.
Yes. And I think it all comes down to communication because,
Mm,
throughout everything, it was like, yeah, they were butting heads with each other, but they were clearly on the same team. Even when her friend was upset with her that she didn't tell her that she was
oh, Nakia, yeah.
the hero, even while she was angry with her, she was helping her the
Yeah.
entire time. She's like, all right, we're going to hide you out. We're going to figure out this plan. We're going to do this. And me and you are going to talk about this later. But girl, I love you. Right.
Yeah.
And it's communication is such key. And so many times it's almost like a trope in movies and TV shows now. Like, oh, all you had to do is just communicate something to them. Like, even when she pulls the fire alarm at her brother's wedding,
Yeah.
even if you don't want to tell them, by the way, I have superpowers, just say, hey, there's some people here that don't
Yeah.
mind murdering people. I pulled the fire drill for that. I pulled the fire
Yep.
alarm for that. Like, that's why
Yep.
I did it.
I know, yeah.
Don't just say,
Oh.
right, like something.
Now, all this being said, Keaton, how long would it take you to forgive me if you found out I had superpowers and I did not tell you?
I'd honestly probably forgive you pretty quickly. I would probably forgive you pretty quickly just because I can be pretty neurotic and worry about things and overthink things. And so if I had superpowers, it would probably take me a long time to tell people to. And
Okay,
so
let me rephrase then. How long would you be mad at me if you found out I had superpowers? I didn't tell you, but I told one of our joint friends, because that's actually technically what happened.
that would upset me.
See, that might
That
be.
would
I think
upset me
that's
because it's
where
like, okay,
Nakia
you
really
trust.
got upset.
Right. But yeah, well, but that being said, and here's the difference, because the reason he found out was because I think he was there. He saw it when it
Yeah,
first
yeah.
manifested, right? And so that's why he knew. But yeah, it's one of those things where when it happens, you say, "Hey, so you trust this person, but you don't trust me." But it's always the same thing. Oh, I didn't want you to be hurt. The me telling you would have put you in harm's way. And that's
I
what
think you still would be mad at me. Even if I gave you, oh, I don't want you to get hurt.
I would have a ton of questions, but I also like I'd probably want to be involved in some way. I mean, we're talking sidekicks this season, right? Like I'm like, yeah.
So I mean, are we talking like you want to be my Robin, or you want to be my Alfred, or my Oracle, my Lucius Fox? Who you talking?
I just want powers as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm like, all right, so you have powers, right? So how'd you get them? That would be the thing. I'm like, all right, well, share the wealth. Like,
Okay, so I probably wouldn't tell you then because I'd be afraid you would like end up accidentally killing yourself trying to get your own superpowers.
No, because that would then make me a oh,
Mm.
huh.
Yeah. I think
No.
you would end up
You would
being
help me get
my
powers
arch
because I would
nemesis.
mention just how I would not be your arch nemesis. But what I would
You
say
just said
is
you'd be a
like, hey,
supervillain.
I we're
And it
dealing
would
with
be a
the
direct result of my own. Mm,
we're dealing with the multiverse here, okay? More than one thing
mm,
can happen in different realities.
okay.
And there's one reality where I just get the powers with you and it works the same way it works for the Fantastic
But it's like
Four.
Invincible, where most of the multiverses, you're a supervillain.
Yeah, but it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. But yeah, I think I would probably maybe I would react the way she did if there was someone else that did that
Yeah.
knew, right? But like
That changes things. Yeah.
it does because you feel like someone doesn't trust you. And that's a bad feeling. Like,
Mm,
oh, I feel like I couldn't because even if they say, "Oh, I was trying to protect you," it feels like, you didn't trust me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the secret keeping is a huge theme, even outside of just the general communication, like you were talking about. I mean, Spider-Man, um, he essentially like I mean, you see how keeping his secret just gets him in all sorts of trouble, especially the Tobey Maguire ones. I feel like that was a really huge theme there.
He was
I
always stuck between a rock and a hard place,
He really
though.
was. He really was. I mean, I'm not saying
Except
it
the
was.
butler that could have told James Franco this the whole time and then waits for the third movie after he's hell bent on killing Spider Man. Oh, yeah, by the way, your father's wounds, they were self inflicted.
Dun dun dun.
Thanks, dude. I've been trying to kill my best friend for like years now, and I really appreciate you bringing that to me. You're the worst butler ever, unless you compare it to Alfred in Dark Knight Rises. But anyway,
Wow.
I am.
You know, actually, I was gonna say it's been a while since you've dissed that movie, but that's probably not true.
Yeah, no,
Is that?
I I diss it every day. That I'm just not always being recorded. But yeah, so the secrets are a big deal, and I was really happy that at the end of it she trusted her family
Yeah.
with this information because so many times the the superhero thing, it always gets like, oh, I keep it a secret from everyone.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
what becomes a focus later on? The fact that they don't have a support system. Like that
True.
happens every
It's true.
single time. It's like, oh, Spider Man, a loner, no one knows about it. And then he's suffering because of it, because he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have anyone to lean on. He doesn't have anyone to bounce stuff off of, right? And so I do love that they went ahead and they were like, yeah, this is her origin story. Her family knows. They can still do
Yeah.
everything together. They know where she is at night. It's not this source of confusion where, oh, she missed my birthday party and she won't tell me why. Cause that gets so frustrating when it's like, oh my God, just tell them. Just, oh my God, just tell them that you're a superhero and you were the one that caught their car on the bridge that night. Like, just tell them. They will completely understand. And that's something. If I had superpowers, I would have to tell someone because
Mm,
I could not handle my closest friends and family members just being like, "You just don't love me."
mm.
Right? Because you left my play and just never came back and you're just telling me that you're sorry and now I see you here eating a slice of pizza.
I think that in order to pull it off without actually sharing about your superpowers, yeah, these people are also terrible liars. So you need to come up with
They
something. You need to come
always
up.
are.
They're so terrible. Like come up with something like I don't know, you have a job where you're on call
Yeah.
and right? There's so many jobs like that where you could I mean, I guess I was gonna say you have a beeper, but I guess it's not beepers anymore. You just have your
Wow.
phone go off. Sorry. But yeah, you could have a job where you're on call a lot of the time. You could have some sort of diagnosis. I don't know, like IBS,
Something.
super embarrassing. But you know what? People have it. They deal with it. They figure out a way to manage it. Maybe you
Yeah.
have super bad IBS or you have some sort
Something.
of disorder or something that can flare up. And so you've got
Something.
to kind of, yeah, just come up with
But
something.
every time it happens, they're it always happens in combo. They're the worst liars ever. It's like, oh yeah,
So
I was
bad.
the best man at my friend's wedding, and I had to leave early because Kingpin was going to blow up the entire city. And then when I make it back, dude, where were you? We needed you. Oh, I had to run to Costco and pick up these breadsticks, and it's like, what the hell? Like, what did you, what? Like, that's insane. Like, what are you, wait, not insane. Bad word.
Think.
No
Yeah.
word.
Yep.
That is interesting. That is
That is
such a
ridiculous. That
ridiculous, such
is
a bad excuse, right?
that
But yeah,
makes
they
no sense.
always do.
I know.
They always have
Yeah,
the
they're the worst
worst
liars.
excuses and the worst. They're the
And
worst liars.
so I think here's one of my issues too is that it would take one or two of those instances, and I would just spend an entire week figuring out all sorts of excuses or reasons from then on so that I had better reasoning. But like they never seem to get better at it
Yeah, they don't. They don't. And the thing is, I feel like Kamala gets a pass because high school.
because she's like 16,
Yeah,
15. I don't know how she is.
yeah. And Marvel does a good job of de-aging people because I looked it up. I think she's in her 20s.
What?
Yeah, she's in her 20s. She's not actually, yeah. They know how to find people that don't look their age. Because same thing, Tom
Mm,
Holland. Tom Holland is 20s. Like he's,
mm,
yeah. But yeah, they do a good job of making them look 15, 16.
mm.
And so,
I think what's
yeah,
realistic about her character too, though, is I mean, we were giving her a bad rap for just not saying anything,
yeah,
but it's a better option than coming up with breadsticks.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And it also it blended in with just kind of her general way of trying to deal with things anyway. I mean, she
Yeah.
just react to her mom and not tell her mom what's going on. And from what I understand, we're all pretty terrible around that age. So yeah, I don't know. You end up just feeling for her bumbling around versus being
Yeah,
like, "Wow, dude,
yeah.
that
And
that lie was so bad.
right.
You deserve to lose all your friends." No, I'm just kidding.
And wow. That's what you get for going to Costco. So, but one other thing that I really, really loved and I wanted to touch on too was Bruno got this huge opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
This
yeah, yeah.
huge opportunity. And so many times they throw this out there where either you can go or you can stay and help your friend. And I loved that he was able to do both.
Yeah.
I love that he was able to do it because what it showed was like you can be dependable.
Mhm.
You can be dependable. You can be that good friend. You can be the person that someone leans on while also still living your life
Oh,
and
yeah.
accomplishing your dreams. It doesn't have to be completely one
Yeah.
or the other. The same way Kamala is still she's a superhero, yes, but she's still going to go to school. She's still going to be there for her family. And I do love the way that they showed those roles, especially with him because he was her right-hand man this entire time, like
Oh,
throughout.
yeah.
And even at the end, he's like, okay, now that I've helped you, I'm going to go pursue
Mhm.
this phenomenal opportunity that I have. And I really, really like that they did that because so many times they do this thing where they're like, oh, look how selfless the best friend is. They gave
Mm,
up their whole life for this person. And I'm like, no, in reality, a lot of the times you just have to find a really good balance.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is nice that they show him being able to maneuver that and not giving everything up, but also um not kind of dipping out early.
Yeah.
You know, he still was able to kind of play out this major plot line and everything. And um yeah, it's definitely interesting because he is such a confidant for her. Um I'm assuming they're probably going to do a season 2. It'll be interesting to see kind of where they take that.
Yeah.
I will here's one thing I will say about Bruno's character though is they always have to have the ridiculously smart person who can help sort out what's going on. I think I would have preferred for him to be more of an average kid, or at least like an average smart kid versus a holy crap, how do you know about genetics
Yeah.
teenager.
Yeah. I was expecting him to be at the very beginning when they first introduced him, I was expecting him to be a fish out of water.
Mm.
Like the fish out of water character, but he was just jack of all trades kind of guy.
It was, in my opinion, it was a little ridiculous. I think they had to come up with what was it, Caltech or whatever, in
Yeah.
order to make sense of how. I mean, first, how was he testing her DNA in the anyway?
Yeah, it was not a perfect show because I remember when she's like, "What do you know about the multiverse?" And I'm like, "Nothing." He knows nothing about the multiverse. Tony Stark was still trying to figure it out. Like, what are you? Come on, don't come on, really? Like it
It
was
was pretty ridiculous. Yeah, and
that was funny when they did that. It's like, what do you know about the multiverse? I'm like, I don't know. Last time, like, clearly Doctor Strange doesn't know anything about it, but maybe this sophomore in high school does.
there you go. There you go. See,
That
you're asking the
was
wrong people.
that was
Wrong
yeah,
people.
that was
Yeah.
really that was
So
great. That was really
yeah,
funny.
yeah, it's like yeah, they always have to have the person who can tie all the things. Yeah, yeah, that wasn't my favorite, but I'm definitely on board with what you were saying about him being able to find that middle ground. And yeah, it was kind of refreshing too, because there were definitely times where you would expect, oh, here's where
Yeah.
the new evil, like you think Kamran's gonna, it's like, oh, he's got powers now. He's gonna turn, oh no,
He's
he's
gonna be
gonna
the
find
big
out his
bad, but it's
mom's
like,
dead. And they kind of flip all this stuff on you. Or like the popular kid who got saved, all of a sudden she knew all along because she's not, she's not oblivious.
yeah.
And she didn't tell because she was like, hey, the person who saved my life can choose when and how they want to share their story.
And I was
Just all these different unexpected things that were nice.
and I was really glad that they did it that way,
Yeah.
especially because culturally, I feel like, you know, Islam Muslims have always like they've been portrayed so wrong so many times.
Mm,
And I did not want this show to end with just the one of these characters with that cultural background suddenly just being out of control and not being able to
mm,
control their emotions and just going full villain, because then it's just I feel like it's almost just playing into
mm,
a stereotype, right? It's like the angry black man trope
mm,
in movies, right? It just kind of
yeah.
plays into it. And so I was really glad the way that they wrapped this up and Kamran calmed down, was able to get out of there and is kind of just trying to start over, right?
Yeah.
Instead of making him into like this villainous character after being introduced to us. So I like the way that they wrapped this up because one, it is a show about high schoolers, but
Mm,
it also shows that like, okay, yeah, they're high schoolers, but they still can have control over their emotions. They still can get things done. They can still react to things in a grown up way, even if they're at this age. Because the same way that I
Mhm.
said that, like, people of different backgrounds are stereotyped, high schoolers are also stereotyped. Like,
Yeah,
you
that's
can
true.
be stereotyped based on your age so much, but what this show I feel like showed more than anything is how you can be young but still have
Yeah.
it together. Like, you're still growing the same way I'm in my 30s and growing and learning to handle
Mhm.
things, right?
Yep.
And so I really love that they did this to show, like, yes, they're in high school. Yes, they are immature, but yes, they also can hold their own and keep it together, even though so many adults aren't able to. And so I really like that as well.
Yeah, that is really neat. And I think too with Kamala's mom, there are a lot of stereotypes about the mother figure who keeps a strong eye on the daughter in particular,
Yes.
and they broke that stereotype too, where you just have these ideas of what would happen if she found out about the superpowers, and yet the whole family embraces it,
Yeah.
and
And they're
just in
so
this
proud of
wonderful
her. It
way.
was
And
oof, I
yeah,
loved it. I loved it. It was really good. So yeah, I loved this show. I am going to rewatch it because the first time I was watching it through, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make sure to get this through because I want to talk about it with the podcast. But I feel like whenever I go back and rewatch things, I always miss something. And I will
oh, for
wrap
sure.
this up though by saying, um, the Eid celebration
Mm.
looks so fun, and I hope that I get to
It
go
does.
to one of those celebrations one day. So if you're listening right now and want to invite me to celebrate Eid with you, just know I'm there in a heartbeat. I want to wear the
Yeah.
outfit. I want to do everything that I'm allowed to do. I want to go. It looks so fun. It looks
So
super
fun.
fun. So yeah, Keaton goes to Eid. It'll be an episode.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Emilia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.